I like to think of myself as something of a storyteller. And if you read enough of my reviews over the years, you would have realized that I always like to put in certain aspects of some kind of tall tale or an event that happened in a certain way. And today, because I'm reviewing rum from my past, I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself as well, because this is something that comes up quite often. Like, fuck are you? You know? Where do you come from? Where's your accent from? I've been called Irish. I've been called Iranian. I've been called Indian or white or whatever. It just changes every single time. And that's not unusual given what I look like and how I speak. The truth of the matter, however, is that I spent a large portion of my life in Guyana. And there's a reason why I'm going to lead off with that, because I got to Guyana after having lived in other countries, and I learned English there. And as well, not just the English that I'm speaking to you in here, but also the backcountry Creole with all these words from Arawak or Hindi or Nigeria or Ghana or whatever, that you can drop into, but that people would not necessarily understand. So when you say to somebody like, you're going to make the nenembal, it's like, what does that even mean? But it wouldn't make sense to a Guyanese, right? The reason I bring this up is because I want to make a certain comment about something about this way I grew up, which was that I did end up learning English really well. Of course, as a boy, I had to assimilate into the society very quickly because it was completely alien to my thinking and my way. Everything about Guyana was different. And then, as it turned out, I ended up going to Queen's College, which is, even in these times, is considered to be the premier high school in the country, although people from St. Stanislaus and President's College and others might possibly disagree. But it was the school where I rubbed shoulders with people who would go on to greater things, or who were the sons and daughters of the merchant princes, the politicos, the diplomatic corps, the brightest and the smartest that the society had to offer, whether they were from the country or whether they were from the city themselves. And as a consequence, I got a really, really good education. I learned to read the works of literature. Of course, you had to do Shakespeare. You had to do all these great novelists of the past, whether they were from Caribbean or from the classical world or whatever. And of course, my father had, Grandpa Kaner, he had a ton of books, which I perused at every opportunity because I was left alone for a lot of my time, just as I had been in my previous countries. And therefore, I just read like a son of a bitch. And that, to some extent, helped me to navigate high school really well. And it was an extraordinarily thorough education that I enjoyed thoroughly. And yet, strangely enough, for all of that, there was a bifurcation in my young manhood and career that changed things quite a bit, because I started working in the backwoods country, working with mining companies, and I was surrounded at pretty much all phases of my initial working life with people who basically, they had a first, second grade education. They'd worked their whole lives since childhood. They sometimes couldn't write their own names or were illiterate or whatever. But I love these people so much because they taught me things about how to live and work among people who didn't share my background. And I adapted to their way of thinking. And of course, they drank like fishes, and they were just the salt of the earth, whether it was pork knockers, whether it was miners, druggers, by which I mean people who drugged or fetched or, haversacks with stuff for the trading posts in the interior and so on. And, any aspect that I have of being any sort of elitist white tower kind of person just disappeared in those years, because there was just no way it could. These people were just the salt of the earth, and I just enjoyed being around people like that. But there was no question that I was always something of an outsider. These people drank like fishes, no question about it. And whether they brewed their own hooch in the back dam, like a charanda from Mexico or a grog from Cabo Verde or whatever, they made their own. Trust me, they called it Bashwar, and it was paralyzingly strong and uncouth, right? Anyway, let me just go a little bit further. Now, Grandpa Kana, my father, he was one of these people who was a life lesson to me in so many different ways, because he grew up in the poor part of Georgetown. His father was a taxi driver, but yet he pulled himself up by his bootstraps all the way up to the heights of education, bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD, Fulbright scholarship. I mean, his career is like just absolutely amazing. And yet he grew up in these extraordinarily poverty stricken circumstances. And there was a time around 1994 that he and I were at some reception, a diplomatic reception of some kind. Don't ask me what I was doing there or why he invited me, but he was, and he took me along. It might have been my birthday or something. And, I saw him in his fancy suit. He was well dressed, well groomed, talked with an articulate way about all sorts of, things regarding politics and economics and what have you. And he mingled with the best and the brightest of Guyanese society as it was there at that time. And yet, after a while, he came to me and said, let's just get out of here. And we ended up going to his old neighborhood in Robb Street, and where we met a whole bunch of people that he had grown up with. And the change in him was absolutely amazing. He shed that air of erudition and achievement and just went straight back into ghetto style, if you will. So he changed his shirt and he put on some sockless flats, and his accent changed, his diction changed, the way he spoke changed. And he and I spent the next 3 hours sitting down there with a bunch of people who were very much like those I was working with at that time in the bush. And we were just drinking, slapping dominoes down, talking shit, making hard jokes and all kinds of nonsense. And this is the rum we were drinking. I, of course, knew this one because this is exactly the same rum that I was drinking in the bush. Now, what is it? This is the Diamond Reserve Superior High Wine, which I like to say is like 3 different lies in one, but it's not exported. To this day, I have never seen it anywhere. And I've traveled the world several times, and I can tell you, I have never seen this rum anywhere outside of Guyana. And to be honest with you, I'm not even entirely certain that it's still even sold in Guyana, because I looked at the website for DDL for their local products there, and they've got the Ivanov vodka and the Lord Roberts gin, and they've got the Eldorado 15 and a couple of Diamond Reserve 151s and puncheons and what have you. But the Superior High Wine, not there. And yet, I really think it should be. Why? Because for the first thing is, it's 69%. There is no other rum aside from the 151, which is even close to this powerful in Guyana. And it is sold pretty much locally. Now, I've mentioned before that DDL's 5-year-old, which was considered to be something of a common man's drinking staple, has never actually been all that well regarded by Guyanese themselves. They used to like the Banks DIH 5-year-old or the 10-year-old and so on, and that sold out, that sold really well there, although that may have changed since I left the country all those years ago. But the fact is that when you go into the back, into the jungle, into the bush, and you work with these people, right, this is what they're drinking, the 69% Superior High Wine. And the funny thing is that, not leaving aside the fact that it's not even mentioned on the DDL website, I don't know what's made of it. There are almost no reviews of this thing anywhere in the rumosphere. None. It's not for sale anywhere that I've ever been. And only 2 people have ever reviewed it. I'm one of them, and the rum hauler out of Edmonton in Canada, he's the other one. In point of fact, he gave me the original bottle that I had. So all of this is preamble. I completely accept that, right? That's perfectly fine, right? And that's why this thing is so long. But the reason I want to bring this subject up is because I've had this is now the 3rd time that I am trying this. And it seems to me that every single time I try this, there are major life changes on my horizon. Because I think it was in 1994 that Dad and I went to that domino session down in Robb Street, and this is what we were drinking. And then shortly afterwards, I got a job offer to go to Central Asia, and I spent the next 10 years working there, learning more languages, learning new cultures. I met Mrs. Kainer there. I had an incredible experience for all this, and that led to my life in Canada, which is where I moved to. And it seems like that was almost like a harbinger of the life change that occurred to me at that time. But fast forward to 2013. In 2013, I was having some issues with the work. It's not that it was boring or anything like that, but the economy was in a downturn. I thought I was going to get hit by, my pink slip, so to speak. And I was kind of worried about where things are going. And then the rum hauler gave me a bottle of this stuff. And the next thing you know is that I got an offer to go to the Middle East, where I spent another 10 years, right? And that changed my whole life in all sorts of dramatic ways that I've talked to people about in the past. And then, well, I ended up coming back to Canada, working there, and then things started to go interesting. But here we are again, and it's 2026, and my life is changing in other ways that would take too long to explain. But let's just say that for the last 6, 7 months, I've been pretty much a tumbleweed around the world. I've just been moving around quite a bit, almost living out of a backpack, so to speak, right? Attending small, almost invisible rum sessions or rum festivals or whatever, traveling around and just trying to figure out what the fuck do I want to do with my life. And lo and behold, when I was passing through Toronto not too long ago, an old friend of mine who I had gone to school with corporate, gifted me a bottle of this stuff that she had gotten when she was down in Guyana a year or two before, which I'd specifically asked her to get for me. So this is now the third time I'm having it, and who knows what's going on with my life. All right, so all of that is preamble. I appreciate that. We are 11 minutes in and I haven't even discussed the rum yet. Let's talk about it. First of all, I know almost nothing about the rum itself, except for one thing. The original rum was made from coffee still number 3. And that, even when Chip Dijkstra gifted me the bottle back in whatever year it was, 2013, he told me that they were probably going to discontinue making the rum from that still and go to the multi-column still, which means that this is a very high proof rum that's been dialed down to about 69%. Now, the Jamaicans have their J. Ray, 63%, and the Worthy Park has their 63%, and who knows what Hampden is doing. And of course, these are almost like exemplars of the mixing culture. For many bartenders who esteem them for their funky notes and everything else. And the 151s are kind of common. Everybody kind of like puts one out the door there. But Guyana actually isn't known for a rum like that. Yet this is exactly what it is, except that it's not part of the bartending staples because it's not exported and people don't know about it. That said, I think it's made from the multi-column still now. It is bottled at 69%, and I suspect that they did that just so that people can get it on a plane and take it out of the country, which they can't do for stuff that's like 151 or higher. And independent bottlers, of course, are in Europe, not in Guyana, so there you go. The fact that it isn't really quite clear here, but it is very, very faintly colored, which makes me suspect that it has been very slightly aged, maybe a year or something like that. And there's some parts of the tasting note that suggest that this is also the case. And beyond that, I got nothing at all. Not the still, not for sure anyway, not whether it's a blend of anything. I tend to think it's not. And have they aged? Have they not? No idea. But the fact of the matter is, if you want to get into really obscure Guyanese rums that are actually made in Guyana but not sold anywhere else, which is this one, this is definitely something that at some point, if you ever go down there to do your pilgrimage down to the DDL premises to see the stills, this is something that you have to try. All right, so I poured a glass, kind of like did some initial tasting notes on this. I'm not going to rewrite the review because I think it says everything that I want to say already, even though it was written many years ago. Nothing's really changed about it. Oh, yeah, oh my God, this brings back memories. Acetones, for absolute sure. Tons of acetones, ethanol, paint stripper, polish, that sort of thing. It is hot. It is so. I wouldn't want to use the word austere, but it is extremely dry. Just to smell it, I don't even know what it's like to taste just yet. It's got some cinnamon, a little bit of vanilla, which is why I think it may have been aged just a little bit and then filtered down to, well, whatever this is. Not a whole lot more to go on that. Not really. So let's try it. That's actually not entirely a fail. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the Flor de Caña 4, which is a white rum. It has an extraordinarily dryness to it at 40%, but this is 69%, and this thing is like the Sahara Desert on steroids. It just puckers you up right up. It just takes everything out of your taste buds right away. But you do get stuff there. Again, it's vanilla, it's acetones, it's white guavas, perhaps a little bit of cinnamon and some sort of sweet breakfast spices, that kind of thing. To some extent, it reminds me a little bit of St. Vincent's Sunset Very Strong, which is at 84.5%. It has that same sense of very, very light fruits, but it is so acerbic, so sharp. It reminds me of the voice of my primary school teacher, Mrs. Jagan, who used to kind of like, say, Mr. Surge Bally, hand please, and a whack with her ruler, that kind of thing when I was making too much damn noise in her class. It's got that kind of dry acidity to it, but it really isn't that bad a rum at all. Okay, so Demerara Diamond Reserve Superior High Wine. It's not listed on the website of DDL for their local products. It is not for sale anywhere, but I know it is still being sold because I did check to see, and it is sold locally. And if you do go down there for any reason, you know what? If you can get a bottle as small as this, why not buy it? It's kind of worth it. At least you can get a taste of it and see what the hell the canner is talking about this time. Well, what is it? Like, why do I esteem it so highly? Well, partly it's because I do like what I call village level rustic rums that are made in a way that isn't meant to appeal to a sophisticated audience, that is there for locals, that sheds some sort of light on the way rums used to be made for people who didn't have a shit ton of money to spend on stuff that was really expensive. I don't know if there are any whiskeys like that, but there sure are a lot of rums, and they're usually white, they're usually unaged, and they're from all over the place. Even the stuff that's made from jaggery in India that is unaged, and I've tried one or two of those, even though those are only at 40%. That like the Vate down south, they have that same sense of untamed wild freedom about them that suggests to me that they are really quite interesting. And of course, the poster child for this kind of rum is definitely a claret. All right, so let's give you a quick evaluation. It is not the sort of rum that you're going to love. It'll probably make a really nice mix, although it is too sharp and too jagged for me to really recommend it unhesitatingly. But what it is what I like to joke that it's what real men and pork knockers drink in the Guyanese bush. Whole swaths of society down there drink it by the pint in beer gardens up and down the coast. And the men just don't really mix it. But, they get paralyzingly drunk on it in a lab time. And then they go out and find some shady lady down in Rob Street or wherever. For them, they won't waste their time with a 40% XM 5-year-old or the King of Diamonds 5 or any of the 50-year-old or other DDL products or whatever that go out. No, they don't. This is a rum. Yes, it's cheap, it's clear, it's bludgeoningly powerful. Watch your step with it. And that was then, right? That was on the two previous occasions I had. But even now, when I try this thing, it is a rumping, stomping, cheerful soldiers and bushman's rum. Take it as it is. It's a blue-collar love note to the working classes, and it will never see the tables of the rich. It's not one you'll ever be comfortable putting on the top shelf. No, I completely accept that. And your friends might even laugh at you if you want to trot it out like your firstborn for review, All the islands and all the rum producers actually do have rums like this one that, don't make it to the international markets. They are almost unappreciated, red-haired stepchildren. Not entirely legit, not made for the upper crust, just for those who need to take the edge off once in a while without mucking around with oaks or vanillas or a spicy turmeric background or a perky little cheeky nose or anything like that. It's rough, it's raw, it's uncompromising for me, and I can't really recommend it on that basis, but I like it still. It reminds me of a time in my life and the changes in my life that come from time to time. And if this review at 18, 19 minutes is too long for you, well, it's the storyteller in me, and I really do apologize for you. But it is one of those things that I like telling the story about, even if people just get bored with it and switch off the video. So that's it for today. Just a quick, or not so quick, review of a rum that means a lot to me personally, but may not find favor with everybody. But if you ever do get a chance to try it, I really, really hope you do. And that's it for today. Take care of yourselves, everybody, and have a really, really nice day. Bye-bye.